Grade 11 IT Theory, Module 1.1 through 1.3b, Computer Management, Ways of Combating Threats, Reducing Human Error, Dealing with Hardware Issues. In the last video, we looked at these threats to data categories, and now we're going to look at how to combat these threats. So backup, restricting access to data, reduce malware threats, reduce the human risk factor, deal with hardware issues, and design quality software. Backing up. This is all important. If something goes wrong on the computer, if you have a backup, then half of the problem has been solved. So a good way to ensure backup happens is to use backup software. And a formal, structured backup procedure and a policy is very important in a business, but also at home. To make sure that backup really happens, it's important to have an organized backup procedure. Copying files once in a while to an external drive is not enough. It should be scheduled. At night, when no one is working, is the best. Making it incremental means that only the files that have been changed or those that have been added get backed up. And compressed means that the files get compressed when they're saved, which saves space. The first backup will take more time, but if you do incremental backups, then the next backup will be much faster. Backup software usually keeps both the older and the newer versions of data, so if your data was corrupted during the week, you can restore a version of the data from before the corruption happened. Disk imaging is a completely different kind of backup where the whole hard drive is copied onto another drive. And in this instance, if the hard drive fails, then you can take the drive onto which the whole entire image was copied and use that as the new hard drive. Obviously, you need a lot more disk space than if you back up only your data files. Online backup. So instead of backing up to an external hard drive or an extra drive, you could back up to a server on the internet. There are many online backup services. Examples are Dropbox, SkyDrive, or Box. The advantages are that sometimes it's free. Up to a certain amount, you can get free storage space online. Once you've done the backup, you can synchronize your data files across all your devices, meaning that once you've copied the data onto an online server, you can access that data from any one of your devices, from your laptop, from your tablet, your phone, and then you can share files with other users. Although it could be dangerous, you could share more than you really intended to share, or they could go and, if you give them too many permissions, they can change your files. And being able to access your files whenever you have an internet connection is also very useful. Some backup tips. Don't back up programs. They can be reinstalled. Make sure you schedule the backup. Use an external storage device, meaning that you can't back up files onto the same drive as where you usually work. Keep the backups off-site in a different location to where the computer is. Perform housekeeping so that no multiple copies or versions of the same files exist on a computer. Archive large files or seldom used files, and check that the backups are working from time to time. The next way to combat a threat is to restrict access to data. You can take physical measures, like putting in access control in a company. You can just lock up computers. And using biometric devices is a good way of restricting access. These days, many laptops and tablets have fingerprint readers. You can also take software measures, use strong passwords, grant users appropriate rights and permissions. So you make sure that once a user has logged onto a network, he does not have permissions to access certain bits of data that are maybe need to be more secure for a company, or they may only have read permissions and not write permissions, and so on. This is especially on a network. You set permissions for users or groups of users, and you can set what they can or cannot do with the data. For example, they can be able to view the data, but not to modify it. And certain users will have more permissions to access more of the data than other users. Encryption is another way to restrict access to data. Cracking passwords is easy. There exists software that generates millions of passwords of all sorts until it eventually cracks your password, so that is easy. People tend to keep their passwords too short or keep old passwords going instead of changing them regularly, and that is a problem. So the solution is to use encryption. Encryption is a way of scrambling text or data into a whole new format using a specified set of rules. The simplest encryption is a substitution cipher. So you just replace each letter of the alphabet with another letter of the alphabet, for example, on the table below. This is a way of ensuring privacy, and it can also be used for storage. So before you store your files, they get encrypted and then stored, so that if anybody comes across them, they still cannot decipher what's going on. Moving on to malware threats. Anti-malware is very important. There are many different kinds of anti-malware. You get some anti-spyware softwares, which specifically target spyware. Then you get antivirus software. Some examples are Symantec, Kaspersky, Avast, ESET, which offer protection from all forms of malware. The advantage of using a complete anti-malware software kit is that it's cheaper than buying the equivalent software as separate pieces of software. It's also much easier to manage, and they won't interfere with each other. Remember not to install two different kinds of anti-malware software on your computer, unless they specifically are designed to only treat one kind of malware. In order to reduce malware threats, it's also very important to keep your software updated. That is because software updates make sure that that any loopholes or any areas where there was a weakness in the software and where malware could attack it are dealt with. Operating system updates are very important because a lot of malware exploits the bugs or the weaknesses in the operating system security. So when you do your operating system updates, you might be patching a bit of code where a certain virus was able to attack your software, and this will prevent that from happening again. A firewall is a piece of software. It could be hardware too, on a network, and it is a barrier between your computer and the internet. So as the picture shows, it prevents unauthorized access from the internet into your computer and also from your computer through to the internet. Firewalls check the programs which are trying to access your computer via the internet, and programs trying to access the internet from your computer. A firewall can be software only, installed on your computer, or it could be a hardware. In big networks, there are maybe firewall servers, which is a computer which has the job of just looking after the firewall aspect for the network. Firewalls are built into most operating systems these days. For most users, the operating system firewall is enough, and hardware firewalls can be standalone hardware devices or part of the router. To reduce human risk, the best way is to use your common sense. Beware in the following instances. Make sure that your personal information is not just given out freely, and that you protect all of your accounts where your information may be visible. Be careful of just clicking on hyperlinks, which are supposed to take you to other websites, but may be taking you to the wrong website. Do not organize a meeting in person with people you don't know. Check the website's privacy notices. Make sure that you only use secure sites. Beware of phishing emails. Beware of privacy settings in browsers. And make sure that you set your privacy settings on social networking sites. These are all aspects which will reduce your risk as a human being. Social engineering is really on the increase, so don't be caught by social engineering. Be cautious, protect your personal information, look at links carefully, educate yourself, and the motto generally, if it sounds too good to be true, then it probably stands. And make sure that you install anti-spam software. In order to protect hardware from power interruptions and also from power spikes, one can install a UPS, which is an uninterruptible power supply. Basically, this is a battery which is continuously charged as long as you are connected to the power, but it's also a management system. It protects the computer against power surges and spikes, and when the power fails, the battery takes over the power supply. It will usually provide enough power to last a certain time, maybe half an hour, maybe 2 hours, and during that time you can ensure that you shut down your computer safely. Another way to protect hardware is to use a RAID disk. RAID stands for Redundant Array of Independent Disks. So basically what it is a hard drive which consists of a few hard drives. Instead of just one hard drive on your computer, you have a few which are made to work together. So it allows the computer to treat an array of disks as if it was a single disk. Redundancy is built into the system so that if one drive fails, the whole array still has the data safely stored. It tries to provide a safety mechanism against hardware failure. RAID has levels or methods by which the drives are ganged together. The three most common are RAID 0, RAID 1, and RAID 5. In RAID 0, striping is used. That is where some data is written to one disk and then to the other, and back on the first disk, then to the other, and so on, as if they were doing stripes. Actually, this type of RAID does not offer protection against data loss, because if one drive fails, you still have lost data. In RAID 1, mirroring is used. So the same data is written and read from pairs of drives at a time, which offers better protection.